I know what it's like to live a life driven by emotion, and believe me, it won't make you happy. It's like you're a yo-yo on a string with your happiness tied to all the circumstances in your life that you can't control. If you ask me, this is no way to live. Shining the spotlight of awareness on emotions changes everything. Instead of avoiding or trying to change your feelings, you become aware of them. Then amazingly, you realize you don't need to follow them into chaos and confusion. They don't have to guide and define you. That was Dr. Carol Brenner. I have to be true to my feelings? No, you don't. In fact, the scriptures are full of people who became world changers because they did not let their feelings override their choices. Let's look back 3,500 years ago at when God called a person named Moses to lead his people out of Egypt. And in Exodus 4, this is what Moses said, "Lord, please send anyone else." Then the Lord became angry with Moses. Moses didn't feel like going. He felt like staying exactly where he was. And for good reason, there would be a lot of fears involved with going. Now, was God angry because of how Moses felt? No. But he was angry because Moses was about to let his feelings override his choices. He was about to be mastered by his feelings. And as it turned out, Moses, despite his feelings, said yes to God. And he changed the world. Fast forward about 650 years to the life of Elijah the prophet. The queen of the nation of that time was a woman named Jezebel. Do you know even today if someone calls you a Jezebel, it's not a compliment? And if your name is Jezebel, I'm sorry, I'm sure you're a very, very good person. But nevertheless, Jezebel put out a hit on Elijah. He said, whatever it takes, we're going to track this guy down and kill him. And Elijah, just like Moses had overwhelming emotions of fear, Elijah ended up with overwhelming emotions of despair. In 1 Kings 19, we read this. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life." He could have easily given up. His feelings told him to give up. His feelings were such despair. And he could have just stayed there and either died or been captured and killed. But he didn't. He didn't. And maybe you're feeling a deep despair in your life for whatever reason right now. Maybe you're under the broom tree, whatever that is, and you're in that place where you just feel like you're paralyzed by your despair. Well, you do have a choice. You're not controlled by that despair. And maybe you know, and one great thing about Christian counselors is you can go talk about feelings and work through them to find a place of peace. But don't give up. Elijah didn't give up. He got up, he went to a cave in Mount Sinai where God led him. He heard the still small voice of God, and God spoke to him and said, "Get up and go anoint the new king of Israel, and then also anoint your successor." And that is exactly what Elijah did. Like Moses, Elijah was a world changer because he was not mastered by his feelings. Jump ahead about 900 years later, and there's 3 fishermen named Peter, James, and John. And as Pastor Jason shared with us recently, Jesus said, "Throw your net over," after they had caught nothing. And all of a sudden, their nets were so full that they could hardly pull them in. What was Peter? What were Peter's emotions? What did he feel at that moment? Well, we read about it in Luke 5. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." He was overwhelmed by feelings that he was unworthy. He was overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy. And I'm sure that James and John had many of those exact same feelings. We read this: his partners, James and John, the son of Zebedee, were also amazed. Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of your inadequacy. Don't be afraid of your feelings of unworthiness. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. And as soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. You know what? Peter, James, and John could have easily said, we're too unworthy. Thank you for the invitation, Jesus, but we've got to follow our feelings. Our feelings tell us we're inadequate, we're unworthy to follow you, so we're not coming. No. Peter, James, and John became world changers, at least in part because they were not controlled by their feelings. So, you may have feelings of fear, despair, inadequacy, but remember, the outcome of your life is not determined by the feelings you experience. It's determined by the choices that you make.